Tomboy official, what is up? What is up? How are you guys? It's been a bit. Haven't had anything to really post. I've decided to try posting on here kind of similarly to how I post on the other pods. Um, just kind of niche related, not really too focused on my daily updates, but more so on content that is more relevant for this niche LGBTQ plus community. So I kind of wanted to post about an LGBT topic um, that is from an indigenous culture. Now, I have to let you guys know that I am not very well versed in like every single culture of people out there. I've been studying Alaskan native cultures for like off and on for a couple years. So I'll tell you kind of some background about that, and then kind of the topic that I came into through that through that culture of studying it and kind of just being online and having things recommended to me, because that's how YouTube and the interwebs kind of work. So a long time ago, and I might have talked about some of this, but a long time ago I came across this website called isuma.tv, isuma.tv, and I think I came across it because I watched either on Sundance or one of those indie movie websites. I watched this movie series called Atanarjuat, 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 and I think it's like a 3-part series, and I was able to watch it, I believe, on isuma.tv. I believe it was free on there, so I think I'd seen it on TV or online, or I don't know how I'd heard about it, honestly. But this was like years ago, and then it was the only movie I'd ever seen that was about like Alaskan culture at all. And I was kind of like, I've always been interested in like African indigenous tribal groups and like the ones from the Americas, and you know, and I always knew that like Canada and Alaska had tribes, but I didn't know much about them. And the only thing I knew, kind of like the stuff you're taught in school, like igloo and Eskimo and like Eskimo kiss, and you draw the little people with the furry hats or whatever and the little boots and all the, like when they make you draw pictures in school, and it's kind of like partially racist and very uninformed, and you don't really learn about the culture. And so that was kind of my exposure to the culture. And I saw in the movie, I guess spoiler, there were parts where people were building igloos, and I was like, oh, I didn't notice, you know, I never knew how complex that would be, or like what the actual clothing looked like on an actual person versus the little drawings that they have as making of like igloos and like Eskimos. And I know that like the term Eskimo, I don't think it's very polite. I think it's considered like a slur. So I'm just saying that term just so people know what I'm talking about, but I'll not refer to them as that. Um, I know probably the culture I hear about the most is Inuit, and I still don't know if that's like all of the people call themselves Inuit or if that's like one type of a tribe. I really don't know. I'm still trying to figure things out. It's gonna take me a while, but I thought it was cool. I was like, they have their own I knew that they had their own language, but I didn't know they have their own writing system and like they're, you know, there's a lot of different cultures in, you know, that live in those areas, that live off the land. And I, you know, slowly started looking more into it. Uh, I noticed watching that Atanarjuat series when I started watching the series, the other episodes, and then I started watching other content of people living off the land that was like modern or maybe from the 50s. I started looking and I was like, I can't really tell the time frame other than, you know, how the camera quality is or the sound quality. Other than that, you know, it was really hard to tell other than like maybe technology of like boats with motors or, you know, snowmobiles and things like that, like modern day snowmobiles and like quads and things like that versus like, you know, people using the sleds with the dogs and things. That was the only thing I could kind of tell the difference was between a little bit of the technology, but I was like, other than that, I can't really tell. Like when I'd pop into like a documentary with like footage or pop into something with some footage of the cultures, I was like, I can't tell. Like, is this old or new? Like, because the Artanarjuat series is like an ancient story and it's kind of like an older historical tale and of people I think that actually existed. I believe they're actual like it's a story of an actual historical figure, kind of like how in the Bible they have like David and Goliath or things like that. It's like an actual story of people that actually existed. Um, and I think Atanarjuat means the fast runner. So I think that's the translation of it. And um, so I started noticing that, and I was kind of curious and just seeing how people lived, and you know, I started looking into a lot of the documentaries over time, just any documentary I could find. And now this is way back before people even started looking at all into indigenous cultures too much. Like I know during the Rona, when people started looking more at like injustices in different ethnic groups, and you know, a lot of that information came out about the residential schools, and you know, that term residential school, I now that's a popular term. I always referred to them as boarding schools. Like I never knew the name, but I've watched a lot of historical type of shows and movies like Into the West. That series is on YouTube. You can find it. It's not about um, the Alaskan cultures. It's about the cultures and the cultures that were in like the West, the Pacific West coast, like California, for the most part. It talks about those cultures and the people coming from the East, the colonizers. I don't know the terms, but the white people that came over to the and the black people that came over to the West for their various reasons. Um, Feeling like the West was kind of like a better setting for them, and they wanted to escape the kind of like American culture that was there were parts of it that they didn't like the racism or like being stuck in these kind of like job roles where you take your what your father teaches you, or you're stuck in the house, or the marriage for the women and all. Like it's a storyline of the Wheeler family that kind of them and some other people leave and try to get to the West. I'm not going to spoil that, but it's like a lengthy series. And there is some, I guess, spoiler, there is some detail towards the end of that series about the Carlisle School, which was a bad school. Um, I think the movie Indian Horse, that was on Netflix. If it's not still, it has some details about boarding schools. I think Anne with an E. I found that to be a very obnoxious series, but it took place more in like Canada, and there, or I think Nova Scotia, and there were the Woodlands tribes, and I kind of recognize their garb because I watch a lot of powwows and stuff. They they host them a lot live on the weekends, and so I tune in sometimes, and I'm like, there's that kid on Instagram. What's his name? Baby Opie. He's growing up, and he's like, there's kind of maybe a spiritual angle to him. He's really into music, drumming, and he does powwow dancing. And they post some of the footage of him every so often, and you kind of see him. You know, I think he's from a Woodlands tribe, and that's kind of how I learned about that tribe, because I was like, oh, why did they have the kind of like the fur-looking headdress instead of the other ones that are like, you know, the different kinds with like the porcupine or the feathers and different types of things. Like I was like, okay, they have more like furs and things. So when I saw Anne with an E, and I saw that some of the people that were indigenous in that show, um, like they were dressed similarly to how I saw like Baby Opie and some of his people dressed, and I was like, okay, I could kind of put two and two together. And so I'm kind of getting more of an idea of where the different tribes are from and what they kind of might have worn clothing wise, um, being able to distinguish the attire, if I see it, you know, and things like that. And so I was kind of, um, yeah, but yeah, and with an E, there's a little bit of that residential school. And then I think Peter Santinello has a lot of videos. I think he talked to Darwin, who's Navajo, him and his wife or partner. I don't know if they're married or what, but it's called Navajo Man and Lakota Bay, and they have their kids that they jokingly call them the Twindians because they're twin boys, and they basically just do lives of their life every so often, just when he's at home or cooking or taking care of the kids, or when they're out and about, sometimes they'll post footage about it, and they have a pretty big following. So I tune in sometimes when he's live. He's very positive, he's kind of funny, a little joking, a little sarcastic, but I like to see kind of what the comments are, and like, that's the kind of stuff I like to watch, so I get really into it. And then, because he's like a modern day guy, but he was talking to Peter Santinello. That's how I got interested in his content and learned about it, about like skinwalkers, because I was into that Skinwalker Ranch show. Even though it's kind of creepy, it's not really up my alley with the creepiness, but it's up my alley with the cultural significance. And so I was kind of like, okay, that's interesting. And then, so there's all these different angles that I kind of learned about. And then, Peter Santinello interviewing like Lakota people, Navajo people, Crow people, and a lot of them were talking about, the differences between the residential schools and the school systems, and the Indian Bureau of Affairs, and like the current school systems, and kind of how the tribal life works on the reservations, and showing the reservations tours and stuff. Talking about the economy, housing, how people can get housing, how people maybe aren't supposed to be on the land hunting, or the complications of things. So that was like a modern day version. And then a lot of them, they talk about dating and stuff, and like how do people date. Like some of the tribes, like the women have all the wealth, and so the woman has the house and the wealth, and so a man who wants to marry has to, if a man divorces, or if they get divorced, the guy doesn't have the house. It's the woman's house culturally, and so the women keep the house. The women have the land. The women are the landowners. There's stuff like that. That's like, and I'm just like, a lot of times when I learn this stuff, I'm a little pissed off. I mean, of course, the history of how the people were treated is just I don't even have words. It's just, it's not okay in so many different ways. And it's still not okay. Like, there's still a lot that's going on that's just not okay. And also, just how, when we're taught history in school, like, how much we're not taught. Like, I've learned that by studying history on my own. I'm like, why are we never taught about these people? You know, we're never taught about anything about them except for like some weird little pilgrim and Indian story about Thanksgiving or whatever. Like, you're taught usually like these basic things of like wear a feather and make these noises with your mouth, and it's like in college maybe you're taught like a little bit more, but I'm like, it's a form of oppression that's just not okay, that people aren't even taught basic, like all the stuff that I'm explaining is like just the scratching of the surface, and there's so many tribes, so it's like I can't even like make one episode about various tribes, like from all these different countries, from like what would be like what South America, Central America, North America, there are so many tribes, is like, and they're all different people with different cultures and different ways of doing things and different languages and different systems of marriage and economies and different ways of living. Some people are more nomadic, some people are more like settled in one spot, depending on kind of what their economy looked like, and you know how many people can you marry, and like what does that look like, and what ages do you do different things, and what are the rites of passage and spiritual practices. It's so many different things. It's like comparing like American culture to Chinese culture to Mexican culture to, even within those cultures there's different subgroups. Like American culture, you don't just have like Americans, you have there's different types of Americans. People in Louisiana live different from people in LA, live different from people in New York, live different from people in, Montana. It depends like what part of the world you're in and what you're doing, and it's so different. And I don't know why American culture seems to just like try to wipe out even like the history. But in these, I gotta turn this heater off. It's like I'm melting over here. I gotta go through all the settings. I'm gonna turn on the fan. So basically, in all these cultures, there's so much variety, and we're never really taught, unless you go out of your way to learn, you're not going to be taught this stuff. The only time I saw anything come out, all these years that I've been learning about these cultures on my own, the only thing I've ever seen come out was like when there was exposure about the residential schools. And I feel like it only came out because, Black Lives Matter movement got bigger, and then the LGBT, movement and pride and everything was like bigger, and like trans rights got bigger, and QPOC movements, like all those different movements. I think the residential schools kind of, like, I don't want to say it came out of that, because all these injustices were going on for so long anyways. It's just it all was brought to the surface during the pandemic, I think, when everyone was like sitting there learning about things and just being like disgusted, by having all the time to kind of sit and learn for once, because they're not too busy, or as busy going out, or couldn't go out. And so I think people got more educated about different cultures in that way. That's kind of how I see it. And then a lot of the different tribal affairs going on around the world, maybe they caught some attention. The missing women and all these types of things. I mean, this stuff has been going on, but I mean, like, I think it all just was brought to the surface, because like people were like looking and opening their eyes for once. The whole country had their eyes kind of a little more open than usual when they're in, versus when they're kind of like stuck in the matrix, you know. And so, you know, I think people were more open to using their minds and thinking, and that's good, you know, that's good. But you know, I don't like that how in our culture things get kind of, they come in phases. It's like a popularity, like, oh, this is popular, everyone's learning about it, it's popular, you know, we're all protesting and walking the streets for, you know, for these things, and it's popular now to do it, you know. This is popular to be involved, it's popular. um, and then from that point on, you know, the popularity kind of goes away, and people just move on with their lives, and whatever the next news story is now, people are going to focus on that. And you know, but I do think it's good that people get informed. I'm just a nerd, so I get into things that I'm into, and I just kind of keep learning about them when I'm in the mood to learn about them. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, I'm just saying, like, this is the kind of stuff that I consume, you know. And so, you know, I'm starting to notice how hard it is to find information about LGBT culture. It's not really called that in every culture, but because of the spread of Christianity and all these other religions and the residential school systems that didn't only happen to the indigenous populations in the Americas. I mean, it happened in African countries. It's happened everywhere. Like, unfortunately, tribal nations. There's other people that are always trying to overtake them, take their resources, take their land, wipe out their culture. You know, I'm not trying to make people feel bad, you know, about what their race is. You know, like, not everybody who's from the UK or from England believes in that kind of stuff. But there are certain cultures that you kind of see kind of having this theme of, like, just trying to take. I mean, the US is another one, you know, like, they exploit, you know, with the oil and everything. So I'm not even saying, like, Americans are, like, you know, I'm part of that system, you know. I have an iPhone that has a bunch of, you know, components in it that were taken from God knows where. You know, I don't think these were, like, mined from my backyard. You know, they were taken probably from some other country, you know, that, you know, is getting exploited for resources, for technological purposes. The oil and the, you know, the fuel I use for my car comes from somewhere, you know. A lot of things, you know, it comes from places that I don't necessarily agree with these systems. You know, the clothing that I might buy, you know, if I buy Nikes or Nautica or whatever it may be, there's probably some person stitching it that's making like 5 cents a month or something, you know, and that lives in some dorm style in some factory somewhere. Like, American culture is based on, you know, cheap labor as well. And, you know, it's like a modern day version of all this stuff. So, you know, even though racially, you know, you wouldn't say necessarily that the black culture is known for, like, exploiting like that, you know, technically as an American, you know, I'm part of a culture that consumes things that are made in ways that is exploiting other cultures, putting other cultures off of their land, putting other people, you know, like, destroying their nature. I'm aware of this. I'm aware of it. It's not easy to sit and think about it. I'm aware of it, but I buy into it, you know, and I do kind of sit and think about it a lot, especially because I'm into, like, drop shipping and, you know, like, reselling and stuff like that, and e-commerce, and I'm kind of like, is this okay to be, like, having random people in China, like, not living in good conditions but making this stuff so I can buy it for cheap off Temu or whatever the heck and resell it for a profit? I have a bit of a problem with that, I do. So I'm not going to say that I'm perfect and that I'm not aware. Um, but I don't know, that's a different conversation for a different time. Um, but it's heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff. It's still happening today. I mean, it's not the same. There's like an evolution to this type of exploitation and rape of cultures and just making it so that people can't live the way they want to live. Like everything is becoming or trying to become more and more similar and forcing people to live similar to like this Western lifestyle um, that a lot of people don't want to live, but it's like they're being forced into it. And then it's like, what are they going to do? The fishing village maybe is too polluted. They can't fish there anymore. So now they've got to find another economic means. Um, if they can't, if they don't have a forest anymore to go get their stuff and make their houses, they're going to have to move, or go do something else. Like this kind of stuff is happening all over the world where it's like there's these big corporations, these countries that are allowing their corporations to kind of go in and just like destroy everything, and people are being forced. They're like, well, you just live this Western style, go to school, learn this way, get a job in these types of fields, but not all these places have the jobs available. So like, what are they gonna do? So there's only certain places where people are gonna be really able to like live, because they can't live off the land if the land is being destroyed by oil rigs and all kind of stuff. And so, I mean, I don't know. I can go on and on and on about this. That's not really what I was trying to record about right now, but it's all related. Like it's kind of hard to not talk about it and then try to talk about these different cultures that live off the land, and then try to not talk about all the other stuff that's destroying that way of life, or multiple ways of life. It's not like one way. Like I mentioned, there's fishing, there's forest, there's, hunting, there's all kinds of stuff. Like if the animals are polluted because they're eating all this stuff that, is now, you know, contaminated, water's contaminated. So basically, let me move forward. I do want to talk about all that in detail. I just don't know how to like bring it up on this podcast. I don't really know where to put it. It doesn't really fit. I know a lot of LGBT people are into activism. Those are some things I would say to try to look into. I'm really proud of, Gen Z and Gen Alpha and the millennial generation for caring about these things. Because we kind of see the reality. I mean, we're already screwed, in multiple ways. So it's important. It's important to see what the options look like. So I went on a rant there. It can be expected. That's how I roll. But getting back to what I was saying, the content is a lot more. There's a lot more content now than there was, because of the popularity of like exposing what's going on. And I think it's good for people to look into. It's good to know, I like to know, I'm starting to like to know where what I buy is coming from. And do I agree with that? And why not support these other people who make and create, different things, who have a different craft? Why not support, indigenous cultures, buy their jewelry? Why buy the jewelry out of the mall? Buy the jewelry from these people, buy the clothing from these people, you know, uh, support small businesses, support indigenous businesses, tribal groups. A lot of these people are trying to make a living, and I think that's just the very least that people can do, is at least kind of curb their shopping to try to make um, something that people can, support the people so that they can live off of what they're making, um, so they can kind of find, a new method of economy for themselves based on their own values, cultural values and things. I think that's one method. Get off of the the Chanel and the Gucci and all that, and go buy other stuff from other people. I mean, it's only valuable because we say it's valuable. If you know how much it costs to actually make some of these things that are marked up hundreds and thousands of dollars for like a pair of jeans or like a white t-shirt, you know, it's kind of scary when you think of it. But the groups, the different indigenous groups that are, Alaska based, there are a lot of them, and it's, I'm still learning the names of the places, the names of the groups. I think there's a movie called Grizzlies or something like that, that has it shows a school that's learning lacrosse. I think this white guy comes to teach them, and then realizes they don't have any outlets. There's no extracurriculars. Another thing is the rate of, kids and people in some of these cultures ending their lives. That is definitely an epidemic that's going on. It has been going on for a really long time, a very high rate, unfortunately. It's still going on, and there's I don't know, watch it. These are good movies to kind of consider. They're dark. They've got a lot of intense scenes and themes, but I'm liking seeing some movies out there that do exist that weren't existing before. Because like I said, I was looking for this content before people were even like talking about it, and it was hard to find. Like, I wasn't finding hardly anything. Like, there was like nothing out there. So I like when I see people from the cultures releasing movies and stuff about their own people versus like Hollywood being like, this is an Indian kind of thing, like, and having like a white person playing like a dark-skinned person, and it's like weird. It's like, what, you couldn't find like a native person to do it themselves? Like, I don't know. But the history of it, of the media and everything, I it's becoming weird. But I mean, it's also, there is censorship, but then it's also becoming more I guess people are able to tell their stories more. I'm noticing that more and more. Indigenous groups are having more of they're making themselves more visible, and so all that to say, like, how I got into what I'm going to talk about briefly. I was watching this show with my mom that I'm not going to finish because it's a little too intense for me, but let me see the name of it. It had Jodie Foster and Callie Reyes. Now I thought Callie Reyes was black. Um, and I went and looked up the characters for the show. It's called True Detective Night Country. I guess it's on Prime, Cinemax, or Max, whatever Max is. I'm assuming Max is Cinemax, I don't know. But they have that cult, so I started watching that, and then when I looked up like I already knew a little bit about Jodie Foster, but then I looked up, I guess, an interview with Callie Reyes, and I was like, oh, she's like from like indigenous groups. She's not from the indigenous groups that she's playing the character from, but she's at least from indigenous background. She's a boxer, a professional boxer, and actor, kind of slightly newer actor. And I started getting more interested. I was like, okay, let me look up some of the culture, some of the places that are being mentioned in this show, and because it was very familiar. A lot of the themes were kind of familiar because I've been watching so much content, from about these different groups of people for so many years now. So seeing an actual series that takes place within these cultures, it's not like a documentary or something, and it's actually like within their society, and like it's kind of like night all the time. It's kind of like interesting, and there's kind of like spiritual tales, these spiritual cultural kind of ideas that come up, these kind of supernatural kind of things. It's kind of like supernatural-ish, but there are some kind of ideas in there, but it is kind of also like entertainment. It's not like fully like cultural, but it's more so than any other series I've ever seen. It's like a potential modern version versus like movies. Like Grizzlies is another one where there's like, it's like a movie about like modern, like the kids that go to school and kind of what it's like for high schoolers in those kind of environments, and the struggles that they have, like even seeing how much food costs, like $20 cookies and like stuff like that, and then people having to live off the land. And so I guess that threw me into an algorithm, where they kept recommending to me this video. It was a stupid video, I've got to say, but it was a video. I'm not gonna link it, but it was, what was it called? It was something like the weird sexual practices of Alaskan natives or something like that. I didn't like the title, so I kept skipping it, but it kept coming up. So eventually I gave in, and I was like, let me just watch it, because this is the only one that keeps coming up that I haven't seen. And I didn't like it. It kind of put people down. There was a part where the narrating person said things like nasty or like animals and things like that to try to describe, the sexual practices, because I don't know which groups they were talking about, but some of the groups seem to have, at least historically, a more flexible culture with sexuality. Like, I guess once you're of age, there's not really, I mean, there are rules, but it's not like the Judeo-Christian society of like one man, one woman, nothing else. You get married, and you get one chance forever, and like that's all you get. and I really want to look more into it. But the part that was LGBT related, there's a movie called, and I want to find it. I cannot find it anywhere. I've been looking. It's called Two Soft Things. No, it's called. The website is twosoft2hard.com. Now that doesn't sound okay. And then it's called Two Soft Things, Two Hard Things. It says Best Documentary Jury Award, Fairy Tales Queer Film Festival 2017. They got a whole bunch of awards in 2016, 2017, nominations and everything. A lot of screenings in 2023, 2021. But basically, there's a term within some of these cultures that two soft things is considered like two women being together, and two hard things refers to two males being together. Now, I don't know if all those cultures use the same terminology. This is the only terminology I've come across, and it was from the video that I didn't like of this person trying to like look down on these cultures for their sexual practices, calling them nasty and disgusting. And it was mostly talking about the relations between husband, wives, how people would give their wives to like a guest, and things like that. And how I guess teens of age were able to kind of just go off on their own and like, have, sexual practices with one another, and, nobody was like telling them not to do it necessarily. It's just, and I'm talking about this from a perspective that I don't even know. Some other guy was online talking this way negatively about these cultures, and at the very, very end, he says that he used the word homophile. I don't even know what that word is. Let me look that up. I'd never even heard that word. I was like, who says, I don't know, like it. So it says homophile, relating to gay people, a gay person. So when he said, he was saying homophiles. And when he said that related to those cultures, he was saying that those were the terms, and that was the very end of the movie, or the YouTube video was him talking about two soft things and two hard things like that. And so I was like, okay, so that's the terminology. So I went and like looked it up. I think it was like two soft things rubbing against each other, two hard things rubbing against each other, and then I went and looked it up, and then it came to like two soft things, two hard things, and then it came into this movie that I cannot find anywhere, even to purchase it, because I was going to buy it. So I'm going to keep looking for it. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to know more about that culture. It's just hard to find information about cultures that are pre-missionaries. I think in the 50s, the 1950s is when these cultures started getting more and more, bombarded and attacked, and people trying to tear them apart. There was something about Russia selling Alaska to the United States, but it didn't become a state for a while, and there's a lot of details there, but I really want to find this movie. I want to find other movies like it and talk about them, and watch them. But I guess I had to give like a lengthy background, because like I don't have much more to say about it. It's just a topic for now that I want to be looking into. So I'll probably record more about this topic. I'll probably record more about relevant topics. And we'll see where we go from here. I'm gonna post isuma.tv. I'm gonna post this toosoft2hard.com website. And I guess if people want to look into it, they can look into it. If I find it, if I can watch it, I want to review it. My goal right now is to try to find material kind of pre-colonial, Judeo-Christian missionary spreading. What were different groups, not just in Alaska, but what were different groups of people before they met these missionary types and these colonizer types with these different beliefs, where they were trying to like kill the culture of the indigenous peoples all around the world. What were these different people practicing? I think there's value in knowing about older religions, about old religions, about old spirituality beliefs, about sexuality practices and beliefs outside of the Judeo-Christian and missionary world, because I think a lot of it is so spread, but I think there was a lot more variety. We're just not taught about it. And the more and more I study history, the more I learn that, we've been lied to a lot. Anyone who's part of any kind of minority culture, you've probably been lied to about a lot of stuff, either about your race or your ethnicity or your language or your skin tone or your religion or what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. But there were people living these ways a long time ago. And, even though I was raised Christian, the reason why I was raised Christian is because I'm from indigenous groups in African countries that the Adventist missionaries came and basically wiped out or tried to wipe out language, spirituality, all those different types of things, and make them into the Christian people. But they weren't Christian. My ancestors were not Christian. My great-grandparents weren't raised Christians. They had to become it, but they weren't raised it, So what kind of world were they living in before, the Dutch and all these people came over into South Africa, into Zimbabwe, before Afrikaans culture was like spreading, like before apartheid, what were they doing? I don't come from like Native Alaskans. I come from, Native Africans in the South, from Ndebele people. So, I mean, we weren't always doing that stuff. So it's important to know. I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to keep on learning. What I learn, I'll post. It might take me a while because this isn't easy information to find. It takes a lot of digging. I might even have to make some purchases. So we'll see.